What's up, guys? This is Dan Wilson, and you're listening to the Ddon.Life podcast. We have another special episode. Diet and the PEO solution. Professor Peskin came on the show to talk about the benefits of taking plant-based essential fatty acids in their parent form. If you haven't heard that episode, you might want to go back and listen to that episode before you listen to this episode, because in this episode, we have another very special guest. His name is Dr. Jeff Matheson, and Dr. Matheson has been using parent essential oils in his medical practice. Now, the parent essential oils that he's been using are the same ones that I've been taking for the past 12 years that I've talked about before, and I swear by. A little bit about Dr. Matheson. He got his MDCM degree, which is Doctor of Medicine, Master of Surgery, from McGill University in 1991. He was then an emergency physician for 15 years, and then he got into pain management. He is also the founder and medical director of Pure Life Science. That's Pure Life Science, and you can check that out at purelifescience.com. They are the parent company for the product Pure Form Omega, which is the parent essential oils. That's the same parent essential oils that I've been taking for the past 12 years. So I'll get right into this awesome conversation with Dr. Matheson, but before I do, I just want to give a very warm, special thank you to Dr. Matheson for taking the time to do this podcast. It was extremely insightful, and I'm very grateful for it. He's an absolute gentleman, and I would say maverick, just like Professor Brian Peskin. So these guys know each other, and they're doing absolutely great work, in my opinion. So with that said, here is the conversation with Dr. Jeff Matheson. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, this is Dan Wilson, and you are watching Ddon.Life. I want to thank you for joining us today. We have a very special guest. His name's Dr. Jeff Matheson. Dr. Matheson has been using parent essential oils in his medical practice, and he's here today to tell us a little bit about it. Dr. Matheson, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us.
Well, pleasure to do it. It's certainly an area that needs a lot of exposure because of the amount of chronic disease we're seeing in the world today. As you can tell from the introduction, my story is I was actually an emerge physician for 15 years. Got out of that gradually and more into the chronic disease, chronic pain management side of things. And about 6 years ago or so, I was hitting a wall, maxing out all these doses of all these medications, tons of side effects. Patients aren't getting better. No one got back to work. And I tried a nutritional process on my own. And I lost 20 pounds, 6 inches in my waist. My arthritis in my wrist went away. My back pain went away. And I said, maybe there's something to this whole nutritional things that doctors just don't get taught. When I went through medical school, you got a 145-minute lecture in nutrition, and that was pretty much it. So I actually transitioned several of my patients over to it. And in an 8-month period, I had 4 patients lose 100 pounds and come off 80% of their medications. And I said, this is a lot more fun. So I decided to actually go and do my fellowship in anti-aging and regenerative medicine because I wanted to learn why did this all work. Now, what was interesting is that my undergraduate work was in biochemistry, and actually I did my focus was actually on lipid biochemistry. So one of the things that happened when I was going down this path is I reviewed some old lectures and interviews. One of the guys that was interviewed was the gentleman you interviewed just recently, Professor Brian Peskin. And when I heard him speak, I realized that agreed with what I was taught or I learned in my undergraduate work. It's like, this makes so much sense. So I was able, I certainly got a hold of his book, and I started using the product, and I realized, yes, this does really make a huge difference in your overall energy levels, health, and stuff and things like that. And so what ended up happening is one of my son's former hockey coaches, who's in his mid-60s, came to see me because he had some back issues, and I said, "Hey, try this, see what you think of it." And he, after a month, came back and he comes, "What is in this stuff?" He says, "I'm now out skating all the 30-year-olds on my team." And so we decided to start a business around it, and we licensed from Brian, and we've been expanding its use ever since, trying to bring the message to the masses. And so I've now accumulated over the last 5 or 6 years quite an immense case report history of successes we've had using this product. And what's really interesting is, and I get this all the time, is everybody says, "What does the product do?" And if I listed off everything it did, we'd be here all day, and everybody would say that's crazy. And but it works on such a basic cellular level that it does improve all aspects of your life. And you has been on it for a number of years now. You felt all those effects. I mean, so I thought today, since the science and stuff has already been gone over, I won't rehash a lot of that, but I think we want to get down to basic clinical results that are quite powerful, and an example of how powerful this really is.
Exactly. That I've heard you speak before on YouTube, your lectures, and there was some cases where you put the people on the oils and they were hopeless. They thought they were hopeless, miserable cases, and it seemed to turn it around.
Yeah. So the first inkling I got that something special was going to happen is one of the interesting things is that I had a couple of very sick patients in my practice. One of them was a type 1 diabetic who had a pancreas liver transplant and was scheduled to have a partial amputation of his foot because of a non-healing diabetic wound. So I gave him product. I said, "Here, just take this and see what happens." Well, 5 weeks later, he cancels the surgery. And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Nobody cancels their amputation surgery. Maybe that's just a one-off." So a few months later, I had another patient who was a vasculopath. She had cardiac bypass and all this sort of stuff, but she came in with a cold right leg below the knee. And she was also scheduled for amputation because they said there was no way they could save this leg. And I gave her product again. And a month later, she cancels her surgery. Her leg's warm and pink. And that's an impressively short turnaround time for something that's incredibly damaging. Anyone who's had an amputation or knows the amputation literature, if you've had an amputation due to medical overall diabetes or other metabolic medical issues, your mortality risk is higher than most cancers out there. So having that kind of turnaround in that kind of short period of time was truly an amazing thing I've never seen in at that point. I think I've been practicing for 25, 26 years. And so it convinced me to try it in other cases that would come along, because there's actually no harm done because they're part of what you're made of. So in reality, it's like a magic bullet. It has no significant downside because it is what your body's cells are made of, and it has this incredible upside that it can fix or help underlying diseases that we normally think of as hopeless cases.
That's outstanding. So you've been doing this now for about 5 or 6 years with the oils?
Yes, indeed. And so what I mainly treat in my practice is headaches, migraines, concussions, whiplash injuries, car accidents, things like that. So people who have been chronically injured from those sorts of incidents. But I've been exposed to other people through that, or other conditions through that practice, because people just don't come in with simple migraines. They come in with all sorts of issues. And so some of the more powerful examples are I was doing a lecture in Iowa, and there was a trucker there, and he came up to me, and after the lecture, and he says, "I've taken the oils for about a year now." I said, "Well, that's very nice, thank you." He says, "I was on dialysis, and my doctor says I don't need dialysis anymore." And I'm going, that's an impressively powerful outcome. Nobody comes off dialysis. And it's interesting. I've only just got my second patient on dialysis on it now, and she's only been on it for a week now, but already her blood pressure is normalized in only 1 week. And I'm going to see what happens with her. She also happens to be a sickle cell patient, which is really interesting because I've had another sickle cell patient, and I don't know if you know what sickle cell is, but basically it's a disease of mostly African Americans, or came from Africa. People who have the sickle cell trait are resistant to malaria. So it's a response to the malaria infection. But people who are homozygotes or both parents have the trait, they can have children who actually have the disease. What happens is their oxygen level, if it drops, their red blood cells change shape and can't get through the capillaries or the small blood vessels that supply organs, and that results in end organ damage. So anyone who knows someone who has this, they have terrible bone pain mostly, and they can have other things like kidney disease, all sorts of things, avascular necrosis of the hips, which is, their blood flow, their hips is compromised, so the bone is actually dying. Extremely painful conditions. And what was really interesting about the first sickle cell patient that I tried it in, she had avascular necrosis of both hips. She was able to get off fentanyl and OxyContin within 3 days of starting the oils. And that's an incredibly powerful result. And she has not gone back on any pain medication since that time. And so when I see results like that, I know we're on the right track. And I really want to get more established research and get away from these single cases. But it's hard because there's a huge barrier to entry to any academic research. Costs a lot of money to get into these areas. But I'm endeavoring to try and do it on my own now because there's such a high barrier to entry. Without being major pharmaceutical money behind you, you really can't get studies like this done very easily.
Sure. You mentioned on the phone the other day that there was going to be a wound healing study done at the University of Miami. Can you tell me?
We did a preliminary study at the University of Miami, and it was a 17-patient case series, and we took wounds from all comers, so diabetic wounds, venous stasis ulcers, post-surgical wounds, radiation wounds from chemotherapy, and pressure ulcers. And these were all patients referred to the hyperbaric oxygen chamber at the University of Miami, and these were all sort of resistant wounds that were not healing by standard methods. So all we did was add in the product to their usual care, and we ended up with 87% healing by volume. So if we actually measure the volume of the wound, 77% of all the wounds across the board were healed, with 9 of the 17 patients 100% healed, with no recurrences at 6 months. And that's a truly stunning result. Anybody in the wound care industry who treats resistant wounds like this knows that 6-9 months of dressing changes and all this sort of stuff, and they don't heal very well because they have such compromised blood flow and compromised oxygenation, the tissue, and they're busy trying to treat everything from the outside, not realizing things have to heal from the inside out, right? And so based on that study, this is why we want to go forward with a diabetic wound study, because it's one of the areas that pharmaceutical companies have not been able to exploit because no drug works for wound healing. It just doesn't exist.
Wow. How has the reception been to other your colleagues that you've come across and told about this?
It's interesting. Doctors are very, very difficult to convince of almost anything. But there is becoming, I think there's a frustration building within the medical system because they see that the interventions they're doing medically are not working. People are not getting healthier. So I think that we're going to get to a tipping point where there's going to be more acceptance of this sort of thing. But I get lots of stories where I'll give you an example. I have a patient who, she grew up, her father owned a dry cleaning business, and she grew up and she played in the drums, in the store, and exposed to dry cleaning chemicals, which of course are quite dangerous. And she developed chronic migraines, started using lots and lots of Tylenol, ended up with cirrhosis of the liver. And so she was actually going to go on the transplant list. This is a big deal, right? When you don't have a liver, that's a big problem. There's something called the MELD score, which is a predictor of whether you're going to get a liver transplant or not. So when I first encountered her, she had, that score said that she had a 79% chance of requiring a liver transplant. She went on the oils 6 months later. Her MELD score said she only had a 19% chance of needing a liver transplant. She went to see a gastroenterologist or hepatologist, had a biopsy done, showed the cirrhosis had almost completely healed. She told the hepatologist this is what she did. And what do you think the hepatologist said? No, just a coincidence. You know, right? But this is the kind of resistance you get. Right? But I think people will start changing. The colleagues I've been able to get to use it have felt the difference personally, and I think that's part of one of the things you have to do. Doctors are almost as sick as their patients, so I think one of the things we have to do is get doctors to start using it, and then they feel it themselves, and then they're more confident to recommend it as part of their regime that they would use with their patients. Because we have to do something. I mean, we're hitting. I think we're well past a crisis point, especially in the U.S. I don't know if you saw that. There's a study that came out just before Christmas showing that 88% of Americans now have chronic disease. 88%. I mean, I don't know if I could design a system to make so many people sick.
Right.
I mean, it's incredibly powerful. It's interesting. That study came out at the same time. 60 Minutes did an interview with a guy who was trying to genetically modify people to make them live to 120. Like going, you're not going to get people living beyond 70 at this rate.
Right.
Okay? We got a real problem on our hands.
Well, I've taken the PEOs since 2007, and I started to get into my story with the professor a little bit, but I was in pretty rough shape when I was about 20 to 22, just hardcore. I mean, ultimately, yes, I was partying a lot. It was, I'm in the Midwest. It gets cold in the winter, and that's what kids do. They go to the bar. There was this thing called Beat the Clock, and you would try to take as many shots as you could before the price would go up. And, it was normal to just puke my brains out on the weekend. So obviously that had something to do with it. But now after learning all of this stuff, I was eating so much like deep fried French fries and pizza and processed foods. And that's all I was eating. So I was getting a ton of these adulterated oils, and I couldn't work out. I was getting sick all of the time, just nasty sinus infections, gastroenteritis, weird pink eye things. And when I got on the oils, it was, first of all, reading the book, reading the material, it just made sense, because all of the information that I read online was good fat, bad fat. Okay, why? Omega-6 is bad. Okay, why is it essential?
Yeah.
Take tons of fish oil. So I started doing that, burp it up, and terrible. And I just, as soon as I got on the Parent Essential Oils, it was like, I immediately felt a sense of support. I know that's really hard to quantify, but I felt like a sense of support. But what was noticeable was my eczema. I used to have it all on my face and, like in this area and on my arms, just big dry patches. I'd get it anywhere. It would just break out in different places. And now it seems like my skin has gotten better and better and better as the years have gone.
One of the first things people will notice when they start feeling better is that their skin gets better. The skin is really a true reflection of what's going on in the inside. And so one of the things that people always said when they get on the oils is everybody looks at them and says, "What are you doing differently? You look better."
Right.
And so that's an incredibly powerful thing for patients to experience when you walk into a room and people say you look good or whatever. That's a really big deal, and it's a nice reinforcement so that people will keep on taking the oils and keep on getting healthier. I remember so just a little story about personally, anyways, when I fixed everything and was doing the oils. I went to a Christmas party with my wife, and my wife was doing the same thing. And we hadn't seen these people in about 6 months since the summer. And so this is the intervening time that I did all these changes to myself. And it was the only time I've ever walked into a room where everybody in the room stopped and looked, right?
Yeah.
And, and one of the guys came up with his credit card and says, "I don't know what you're doing, but I want it to." I didn't say anything about what I was doing, but that's how big a drastic a change you can make for yourself. I mean, coming from Canada, when I go to the United States, it's almost sometimes like walking into a different planet. It's the planet of the big, pasty, pale people. Like you can just see the chronic illness
Right.
all around you. It's you walk into any fast food restaurant, it's unbelievable, right? I don't know how people can look at each other and say that's okay, right? I mean, and we talk about fat shaming and all these sorts of things. It's like, no, it's really, you're unhealthy. It's not that we're criticizing people for being fat, but if you're unhealthy, you've got to change your mindset and try, and because you're going to have a problem. And I'm really afraid that within 30 years, the life expectancy in the US will be 50, and you're going to have kids dying at the same time as their parents. Parents will die at 70, kids die at 50. That's a big problem. You get a crashing population. You think you got trouble in economics now. Wait till the population crash happens. There's a major change that needs to take place, and one of it is cleaning up the diet, cleaning up the food that is being produced out there.
Absolutely. And I mean, like I was telling you, when I first had the realization that I needed to turn my health around, I started researching online, and everything I was reading and following seems to me now that was wrong. It was start your day with oatmeal and whole wheat toast and cereal, and then stay away from the saturated fat and take fish oil. And that's what I was doing for a while. So I was exercising, so that helped, but the food cravings didn't go away, and my brain fog didn't go away. So again, once you take the parents' essential oils, it's just like click. I could read a page from a book and remember it, even if it was boring. So it's scary.
And that's what is so powerful, is that when you change your diet to a more ketogenic diet and some of the oils, your brain does change. Your brain is 70% fat, right? So you put the proper fats into it, it changes very, very quickly. Your body wants to be healthy. It's craving health. We don't have to treat health. The body will get healthy by itself if you just give it what it wants, right? The genetics have been pretty well established for a few billion years. We don't need to be screwing around with genetics too much. In reality, it's a roadmap. You put the right stuff in, it'll do it. It'll do just fine with it. We tend to get so obsessed with ratios and this and that. It's like, no, the body's very capable of handling a wide range of stuff, but it can't handle being poisoned, right? And that's exactly what we're doing. We're poisoning the body. We got too much heavy metals, too many pesticides, and adulteration of our oils. It's basic stuff. Like Canada's the number one producer of canola oil in the world, and you drive through and see all these pretty yellow flowers in the farmers' fields, right? All canola, but that stuff is highly dangerous. There was a study came up, it was about 5 months ago, showing that canola oil makes Alzheimer's disease in a mouse model much worse, right? And but then we get the other problem we have is the confusing science that comes out. So a lot of diabetic docs are now switching over to the ketogenic diet, right? So what was really interesting is there was a study that came out, a mouse study again, looking at a diabetic model in rats, and they're putting the rats on a ketogenic diet, and their diabetes became worse. And I said, so when a study like that comes up, all they do is the headline says, ketogenic diet may make diabetes worse or may cause diabetes. And so whenever I see a headline like that, I said, well, let's dive in and see what it actually says. So basically, they fed these rats they call it a ketogenic chow versus regular chow, right? Mm-hmm. And these rats did indeed become diabetic. So I said, well, what's in the diabetic chow? All right. So you actually have to Google it, go to the company's website that makes the chow, you look at the ingredient list, well, guess what the ingredient was? Crisco and processed soybean oil. I'm going, that is not a ketogenic diet. That is a toxic fat diet. And it's no wonder the rats became diabetic, because you have now potentially poisoned their cell membranes, which makes all their insulin receptors more resistant, which is then going to give them diabetes, right? The title is totally misleading. You know, you basically tells you feed a fat poison to any creature and they're going to become diabetic and metabolically unhealthy. But that's what we're doing every day we go into a fast food restaurant. Everything's cooked in canola oil or soybean oil or something like that. And I get some patients who do some deep frying at home. And I ask them, this is a good thing you can ask people if you want. If they have a deep fryer, is there a residue on their walls now that's really hard to get off? And all of them say yes. And McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, all of them have to use these special chemicals to get rid of this residue. Those are reactive aldehydes, like formaldehyde. And formaldehyde is used for preserving dead bodies, right? Yeah. And it's like, that's on your food. These are highly reactive substances. That's why they bind to the paint in the wall and so hard to get off, or they bind to metals, right? They're highly corrosive. But you start eating that, are you kidding me? And the people who work there are breathing it in. And there's a study going on in Taiwan looking at increased incidence of lung cancer in people who work in fast food restaurants from the exposure to deep frying fumes, right?
Yeah.
You know, going and eating deep fried food fried in these oils is way more dangerous than you think, right? And what's really interesting is when you're clean up your diet as you have, if you ever fall back and do it, your body will instantly tell you you've done something seriously wrong.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's been 12 years. I haven't taken them every single day of that 12 years. I run out, I forget to put an order in, and I've gone a month or so without them, and I'll get a little eczema back, or just little things that I'll notice, energy levels mostly. But one of the questions that I received after the Professor Peskin podcast that we did was, what exactly is the protocol? What exactly do you do to follow his protocol? And maybe you could help me answer that.
So whenever you're trying to change your health, you have to do a couple things. First of all, you have to put healthy stuff in, and you have to stop putting unhealthy stuff in. So the way I approach it, first of all, it's weight-based dosing. So you have to take enough of it. That's the first thing. So the oils are come in capsules. They're 755 milligrams per capsule. I generally recommend one capsule per 30 pounds of body weight. So that's the average person is taking anywhere between 4 and 8, or in the average US it's probably 6 and 8, maybe 10 a day. So but it's a food product. So you need to take a lot of it. Then you have to stop the unhealthy oils, right? That's your canola oil, soybean, corn oil, any generic vegetable oil, cottonseed oil, margarine. These are all heavily processed oils. You have to stop putting them in there. As Brian said in your interview, the body can't tell the difference between the two oils. It can't tell the difference between a healthy oil and an unhealthy oil. So the proportion that you're putting in your body is the portion that's going to be in your cell membranes. So if you're eating 80% good oils and 20% bad oils, you're getting 20% bad oils in your cell membranes. If you putting 35 or 40% bad oils in your diet, then you're going to have 40% bad oils in your cell membranes. That becomes an issue because, as he talked about a guy named Otto Warburg, who was a brilliant biochemist and physiologist from the 20th century, he was able to show that if you decrease oxygenation across the cell membrane by 30 to 35% for any period of time, you will make that cell more likely to become cancerous. That's called the Warburg effect. And if you're putting adulterated oils, which cannot transfer oxygen because of the way they're processed, you now have a cell that's more inflamed and is more likely to develop into cancer. So you have to decrease the amount of those types of oils that you're getting in your body. That's the big step, right? Because think about it this way: the cell membrane is like the forest. all the other processes that we look at are like the individual trees. So when you're looking at all other vitamins, such as, your B vitamins, your minerals content, all those sorts of issues, those are all operating on the small tree level. But if the full forest is unhealthy, it doesn't matter what you do to the inside. It won't work. So you got to fix the big picture first, and that's what the oils do. Okay. Then what I do with my patients, I optimize vitamin D. One of the other issues we have in our society is that we've been telling them to lather up in sunscreen and get zero sunlight. That makes no sense, since we used to run around naked for thousands and thousands of years and have sunlight, all day long. We need the sun. It's part of how we stay healthy. And there's some really interesting new research on why sunlight makes us healthy, but it's just not vitamin D. Although that's a big picture of it. There's also the infrared radiation and stuff that's also part of who we are. So I tell people to get their vitamin D checked. You got to optimize vitamin D, and the normals that we're telling patients are actually not normal. Okay, what happens is when you get a blood test, is that our levels are dropping so much that the labs that are actually doing the tests are lowering their normal. Because they're getting so many people that are low, they say, well, normal, but when you have 80% of the people that are sick, normal isn't normal anymore.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the United States, they use a different measure than we do in Canada, but the level in the United States you should be aiming for is around 60. Okay. A lot of family doctors will tell you it's 30, but it's not. It's 60. You want to aim for a vitamin D level around 60. Once you get your vitamin D level to, you would see that a lot of anxiety and depression and all those sorts of things start settling down. All right. So a vitamin D is part of what I recommend to my patients. And I do a lot of dietary counseling. I have other supplements that I use, like curcumin and stuff that are all very, very good. And you're probably, well aware, or a lot of viewers are well aware of a lot of the other supplements that you can find in health food stores and stuff. But our big thing is stop the fish oil, stop the processed oils, get healthy oils into you, get the cell membrane fixed, and the other stuff will start working beautifully.
Yeah, and the supplement that I take, I think, is probably very similar to the supplement that your company produces.
Yeah,
and
they're all licensed. Brian is the patent holder, so they're all licensed from him. And we're all trying to put out the same message.
Right.
It's the way they're processed, the way they're encapsulated, the nitrogen blanket, the nitrogen flush, all that sort of make sure that you get the freshest product possible that has a good long shelf life, and you feel the difference. My company's Pure Life Science. It's purelifescience.com. Pure Form Omega is the product that we have, and the feedback is tremendous. And if you want to ask any questions about what I say, you certainly can info@pureformomega.com. We'll get you straight to me, or go to the website and put in a question through there. I answer all questions personally. So
beautiful. Well, yeah, I just wanted to hit one more point, just really drive it home, that if we didn't have food processing, we wouldn't need a supplement, correct? It would, if we were eating nuts and seeds and they were unpasteurized, organic, and we knew exactly where they came from, there would be no need for a supplement. So I take a supplement because what I've learned because I went to culinary school when I was 18, and I was in food service for 10 years. So I was dealing with these large food producers, people that deliver the foods to us. And I look at food labels, and I've been interested in this for a while now. And you find these adulterated oils everywhere, places I didn't expect to find them. I thought this was a dairy product. Nope, it's a adulterated oil product. And so that's why I need a supplement, because I want to have a life. I want to go out to eat with my friends. I try to control what I eat, cooking it here at the kitchen, at the house, but I can't always do that. So I know that if I take an oil capsule, it's a guarantee that the first thing I get is fully functional parent essential oils, which really, I mean, maybe we can just drive this home again. It is the brick and mortar of every cell in your body. And it's absolutely essential.
It is what you are made of, period, right? And driving home the point about restaurants, well, of course, the United States is very good at eating out. It eats out all the time. The food companies have done a great job at messaging, I guess. It was interesting, a study that looked at the eating habits of southern U.S., and they found that the average person ate at home 3 times a month. And you can understand it, right? We have 2 people working in every household. They're all under financial stress. Kids are getting home from school. They're getting off work at 5:30, 6. The last thing they want to do is go home and try and cook a nutritious meal, which takes time and planning, right?
Right.
And so they end up eating out all the time. Well, even in your fine dining restaurants, if you go back to the kitchen, you'll see big cartons of canola oil, right? Or you go to even go to Costco. Just walk around Costco. You see guys that obviously own restaurants with the truckloads of this canola oil, and you know that's where your food is being cooked in. And so that's basically poison. They're cooking it in poison. And you can try to be as good as you want, but it's impossible to avoid. So you really do have to supplement these days to be able to fight the because otherwise you'll be a hermit, right? You'll be cut off from society. So you're kind of stuck. And the other thing is, watch out, people, for salad dressings. Salad dressings, even the ones that say olive oil on them, usually only 10% olive oil, 90% canola oil. You gotta watch that. Make your own. I always order my salads without dressing. But you go to even the finest restaurants in the United States and go to the kitchen, and you will see cartons of canola oil sitting there, and that's just the way it is. I mean, you jump up and down all you want, but you're probably not going to get that restaurant to change because it's money. It's cheap, right? So
it's cheap and it has a long shelf life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Imagine trying to store a bunch of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, for a couple months in a kitchen that gets really hot and stuff like that, and you'll have rancid olive oil in no time. And
yes. Okay. So maybe we can just, end after this, but what are the main causes of turning an oil into a unfunctional oil?
Any sort of heating is a problem. Interesting. There was an article looking at this with flaxseed oil, which is a little more unstable. But at 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 Fahrenheit, you've got a stable oil in for about 36 hours, and then it starts to go rancid. So there's this chain reaction where oxygen starts attacking it, and it goes rancid. So rancidity is basically, if you go into a fish market and you smell that rotten fish smell, that's the smell of a rancid oil. Okay. What happens in the processing business is they heat oil multiple times to stabilize it. First of all, they have to cook the seeds to get the oil out. Then they stabilize it. It smells like rotten fish, so they deodorize it, they decolorize it, and then they put it in a bottle and say this is a healthy oil. It's shelf stable for years and years and years because it's already been oxidized, so it's already rancid, right? And Brian is one of the few ones that have sort of hit upon this fact that and it was really interesting. It's in his book. There's only one reference to it. A study came out in 1976. They were looking at cystic fibrosis patients. They found that omega-6, the 18-carbon omega-6, which is linoleic acid. Now, I don't want to get too complicated, but it has this almost exact same oxygen dissociation curve as hemoglobin, which means that oxygen can reversibly bind to omega-6. This is why the cell membranes need it. We classically are taught that oxygen diffuses passively through a cell membrane, but it doesn't. It's actively managed by the cell membrane. And it's important because if you actually have oxygen passively going through, oxygen is very reactive. It'll actually do a lot of damage inside the cell if it's just allowed to wander around by itself. So it's actually handled by the membrane, brought to the mitochondrial membrane. All the reactions of the mitochondria, which is our energy producer of the cell, happens on that membrane. So the control of oxygen is really important. And it's interesting that no one's picked up on this fact that omega-6, linoleic acid, has the same oxygen association curve as hemoglobin, which hemoglobin is the molecule that carries oxygen to all our cells, right?
Right.
And so these fats are incredibly important when it comes to oxygen handling, which is why when you poison a system like that, you do so much damage, right? And we see it, right? Cancer rates through the roof, heart disease, diabetes. I mean, you can name any chronic disease, it almost always comes back to impaired metabolic function from damaged mitochondria. I mean, we see it all the time now. And once you fix these problems, I mean, people do exceedingly well, right? You want to hear a great story about a dog?
Yes.
Good dog story. My one of my patients has been following the protocol for about 8 months now. She's lost 93 pounds, doing very well. She goes, "Can I give the oils to my dog?" And I said, "Yeah, they're very safe for pets. In fact, because they're essential. All mammalian cells are pretty much the same." Her dog was a 14-year-old chocolate lab that could not get up and down the stairs anymore because it had so much arthritis. So she started giving the capsules to the dog at the one capsule per 30 pounds body weight. And 2 weeks later, dog's going up and down the stairs and now has a girlfriend down the street and running around and doesn't want to come inside anymore, right? And because its pain is gone, its inflammation is gone. And you know, dogs don't lie, right? They don't know what they're taking. So anybody who thinks it's not a real effect, you know, if you've got an arthritic dog, if your dog starts running around, that I don't know how much more powerful you need. You know, it's really quite, you know, it's really quite satisfying to say that, you know, you can solve all sorts of issues just by making your cell membranes healthier.
So in a nutshell, get rid of the adulterated oils, the canolas and the soybeans, and put in the correct oils, which you can get from purelifescience.com.
Correct.
And then try to cut down your carbs.
Yeah. The ketogenic diet works. In fact, our standard diet from 100,000 years ago is estimated to be 7% fats and about 20-25% protein and very little carbs. Right? You remember, even a bear only gets fat in the late summer when the fruit comes out because that's where the carbohydrates are. But then that's how it builds up its fat for the winter. But during the rest of the year, it's eating high fat, high protein diet. So basically, it's a ketogenic diet. Having carbs available 365 days a year is actually terribly abnormal. It should only be in the late summer when fruits and berries are actually in season. Other than that, you're eating root vegetables and you're eating meat that you've killed, right? I mean, this is what our DNA is made for.
Right. I struggle sometimes just because taste. I like, it's around us everywhere. I go to these co-op hot bars and it's just mac and cheese and potato. But once you start limiting your carbs, it actually gets a lot easier. So it seems like the more you eat, the more you want. And once you start limiting it, for me personally, and I don't eat that many carbs, but yeah, it can become a problem.
And one of the issues that's rising now is there's a lot more veganism and stuff like that, which I don't. That's fine. People are saying that meat is unhealthy. It's the way we raise our meat that's making it unhealthy. Meat itself is not unhealthy. But if it comes from a commercial feeding lot where they're feeding it GMO grains and corn and all that sort of stuff, they're actually putting adulterated fats into those animals, which are then getting into us. Right. It's interesting. If you actually go to the Canola Oil Council of Canada and you actually look at the video and the description of how they process it, what they do is when they deodorize and decolorize, they have a sediment that comes out of it, right? They pellet that and they send it for animal feed. So that's all your unhealthy stuff in there, pulled out of the oil, and then it's pelleted and sold as animal feed. And of course, then you feed it the animals, and then you eat that animal. You're still getting the unhealthy crap. I mean, that's why it's important to grass-fed meats. And lamb is a good example. Lamb's a great food because lamb is by definition grass-fed because they haven't been able to figure out how to screw it up yet.
Very interesting. Right?
Yeah. Corn-fed cows. The reason they feed them corn is cows can't digest corn very well, so they turn it straight into body fat, and so that fattens them up. so they get more money for them. But in fact, it's extremely unhealthy.
Scary stuff. Can I ask you a personal question, or a personal to me? I like to work out. I was telling you this in the conversation. We do, high intensity interval training and strength training, and they're hard workouts. Mm-hmm. I was just wondering what kind of dosage you would recommend someone doing workouts like.
The average person probably just needs a couple of capsules 20 minutes before the workout, and they will do just fine. Mm-hmm. If you're an elite athlete, I will often recommend 3 to 4 before. We have a junior hockey team that's on supplements, and we'll tell them to take 3 in between each period of the hockey game, and that gives them that oxygen carrying capacity, and their endurance level goes up, and all this sort of stuff. Because these fats get distributed pretty quickly in your system. So yeah, you only need about 20 minutes beforehand, and you take a couple extra, you're gonna have an amazing workout. And what's really great about it, because it increases oxygen delivery to your cells so much better, you don't get the lactic acid issues the next day. You don't feel sore the next day, which is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So you do a heavy workout, and you recover much faster. And your workouts are much better. I have a friend who takes them. He's in his 50s, and he has a son that's 20, and he creams him in the gym. Right?
Yeah.
He says his son, and he can't get his son to take. He's like crazy dad in his supplements. Yet every time they go to the gym together, he says, "I cream him," and I'm 34 years old, and he is.
Yeah, my workout partner is 10 years younger than me, 9 or 10 years younger than me. And I mean, it's a struggle to keep up, but I feel like I'm keeping up with him. And
I got one of my patients whose son's a bodybuilder, and he's not the biggest in the gym, but all those big guys come over and watch him lift, because he can outlast them, all of them, because his muscles are working so much more efficiently. He doesn't need the bulk. He's literally strong, and he's got endurance, and so he's working out, and all these big, the big muscle guys are standing around. All they do is watch, and I said, this kid can really push weight, right?
Yeah.
And he swears by them. He says he will not do without them ever again.
Yeah. Outstanding.
Another athletic story. I don't know if you have
Sure. No, I got Yeah.
One of my colleagues. She has a son that I think he was 13, and he likes that sort of 5,000, 10,000 meters sort of middle distance running. And so he went on a protein shakes and vitamin supplementation. He went from being middle of his high school to sort of 5th in the province. So he started on the Pure Form Omega about 3 to 4 weeks before his first race of last year. And he did his race. And he told his mom, he says, I don't think I did that well. I didn't feel like I was running that fast. He had actually set the fastest time for his age group in all of Canada.
All of Canada, wow.
So what had happened, and you'll talk to any professional athlete, his brain was working more efficiently. So he was much more aware of all his movements. So although he felt he was moving slower, he was actually moving faster. So remember what they tell you about any sport. Slow your thinking down, and you'll actually do things faster, right? Be more aware of every movement you make, and that requires a lot of brain power. And that's what the Omegas woke his brain up, and he felt like he wasn't moving fast, but he was actually moving very fast because he was much more efficient.
Sounds like a flow state.
Yeah. It's like you're just in that zone, and I think race car drivers are like that too. They're going 200 miles an hour, but they just feel like it's normal. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
They don't feel whizzing by. They're just so focused on what they're doing that they're processing things faster. But for them, it feels like they're moving slow.
Right.
It's hard to explain, but if you have a more efficient brain, everything else gets better.
And the PEOs, they offer the support. They offer you maybe that's why. I mean, if you have EFA support, then you're going to have a
Your
easier.
brain is 70% fat.
Yeah.
Right? 99% of those is omega-6. Right? It's a 99-to-1 ratio in the brain. If you actually look at the whole brain weight, 99% of the fats in the brain are omega-6, not omega-3. And so the omega-6 is way more important, and that's what the PEOs are. They're dominant in omega-6, but the proper unprocessed omega-6. This is why it works so well for so many different things.
Beautiful. And it's for everybody. No, this applies to everybody.
Everybody. Pregnancy, there's no contraindications. Everybody can tolerate it. And because it's weight-based dosing, safe down to kids. And the oils themselves have no flavor. So they can be put on any food and you'll never know they're there.
Beautiful. Well, it's Pure Life Science, folks. You go ahead and visit that site and pick up some oils for sure. Dr. Matheson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was fun.
And that was info at Pure Life Science if they want to contact you.
Info at pureformomega.com.
Okay.
Or just go to the website purelifescience.com. We did a transition to a much more modern platform. And so we haven't updated the email addresses yet, but go to the website. You can ask any question from the website. Comes straight to me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, and hope you have a great weekend, Doctor.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
And there it is, folks. Dr. Jeff Matheson. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Ddon.Life. If you have any questions, please email me at ddon.lifepodcast@gmail.com. And please subscribe. We're on Apple iTunes using your podcast app. If you have an iPhone, you can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on YouTube at ddon.life. And we're also on Instagram. I post all of the direct link to all of the episodes on Instagram. The link's in the bio. That's at ddon.life. So again, special thank you to Dr. Jeff Matheson, absolute maverick. Also special thanks to Professor Brian Peskin for discovering this info. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. With that said, this is Dan Wilson. You're listening to Ddon.Life. Thanks for listening.